Yes, people, welcome back to the first 11. This is the United. We're going to do a complete breakdown of system, style of play, patterns of play. Apparently there aren't any, or people can't see them. If you object to any of this, please comment, send us a tweet, get involved in the comments right now. Maybe we'll even get you on if we've got time. But Rachel's done a great breakdown on this. She's incredible at it. So let's have a look and see what she's got for us.
So we're going to start off by looking at the different formations that are required for an offensive style of play. We're going to split this into two videos, one offensive and one defensive. And today we're going to look at the offensive tactical play of Manchester United. We're going to go through formation, build-up play, attacking formation, and the patterns of play that we have. And we're also going to go through why they fail against low blocks and sort of go from there. So just gonna get this up. Right, so I just wanted to go through a couple of concepts actually, because I got a couple of DMs asking me what half spaces were. And quite simply, they are just the areas between the wide areas and the central areas. Nothing complicated about them. It's just a straight line down the pitch, and there's two lots of half spaces. And half spaces, if you don't know, are very, very important because for attacking midfield players, especially who operate in these areas, it's very difficult for centre-backs, for full-backs, and for a defensive midfielder to actually deal with players that operate in these areas, because what it does is it drags them out of position. So players that operate in half spaces are important for any team. And we're going to have a look at the zones that are required in on the pitch as well. So every player has a specific set of attributes, and then they have a role in their formation. And every time you have a player that plays in the left side of the pitch, for example, depending on the attributes of the player, they have different roles in those zones. So if you take, for example, Marcus Rashford and Raheem Sterling, if they're playing for England, they will both play on the left side of the pitch. But within those zones, they actually have different roles. So for example, Raheem Sterling as a winger will operate more in this area in a wide position. He can also come inside as well, but he's very good at dribbling and getting to the byline. Whereas Marcus Rashford is more of an inside forward. So he will operate sort of in this area between zone 16 and 17. But they can also have different roles within different zones and deeper areas as well. So this is important when you're thinking about tactical systems, styles of play, and just roles of different players within those styles of play. Every player has different attributes, and that means they have different roles within those zones. So we're going to start off with Manchester United's formation, style of play, and build-up. We know that Manchester United play with a 4-2-3-1, and this formation is excellent at dealing with overloads in the defensive areas and in the offensive areas. So defensively, you'll have a fullback, a centre-back, one of your players in your pivot, and you'll have your inside forward who will also track back as well. And with Manchester United, you also have Bruno Fernandes, who also helps out defensively. This means you have 5 players in that area. And when the opposition team has like a winger and a fullback who will be attacking, and maybe an attacking midfielder that will drift to that side as well, you'll find that you actually outnumber them. So defensively, it's very, very good. Offensively is a very similar sort of pattern as well. So Bruno Fernandes, again, we know that he likes to operate between the lines. He will drift to an area of the pitch that's necessary when the ball's progressing towards that area. You'd have your inside forward, your fullback, and someone in your pivot. Again, you're trying to overload those areas, outnumber players, so that you can get a tactical advantage. So the 4-2-3-1 is excellent at doing that. In order for the 4-2-3-1 to work, though, you need a creative player in the 10. So for Manchester United, you need Bruno Fernandes, but you also need a creative player in the pivot as well. So with us, we use Paul Pogba. When Paul Pogba is not in the team, we don't have creativity in the pivot. And this causes a massive amount of issues. Whether it's McFred or Matic, the issues are still the same.
Rachel, can I ask you what those issues are? When we don't have Paul Pogba in there, and it's McTominay and Fred most of the time, what are the issues we have there?
So when you have someone in a double pivot, the creative player, they usually have a variety of attributes they can do. So they can carry the ball, so they're usually quite good dribblers, but they can also play long passes as well. And they also play line-breaking passes. The defensive midfielder can make line-breaking passes. Some of them do have that in their repertoire, but Paul Pogba has all of those things. McFred do not, and Matic doesn't. Matic has the ability to play a line-breaking pass and see it, but he's very slow on the ball, And sometimes by the time he actually makes that line breaking pass, the passing line will actually close because the defenders have actually got into position to stop it, or the midfielders. So for Paul Pogba, even if the line breaking pass is not available, he's a player that can actually go long as well. So he plays the ball over the top towards our inside forwards, and they can make runs in behind. When McFred are in those positions and when Matic is in those positions, we don't have that. So automatically the creativity is actually decreased just from Paul Pogba not being in the team. So when we talk about style of play, we talk about, for Manchester United, a direct, fast transition style of football. Now, this does include counter-attacking football, but direct football doesn't mean just counter-attacking. Direct football means getting the ball from one end, which is the defensive area, to the offensive area, and as little passes as possible. This can be with one ball over the top. This could be with like 3 or 4 passes, trying to make your way to the box. But compared to, say, a team like Manchester City, who play the ball side to side a lot and progress slowly up the pitch, Manchester United like to do things a lot quicker and a lot more direct. So this is an example of this against Newcastle. And Donny van de Beek gets the ball on the left side of the pitch, very deep. He plays the ball to Bruno Fernandes, who flicks it back to him. Donny van de Beek plays the ball inside to Juan Mata, who plays a quick ball to Marcus Rashford. And you can see Marcus Rashford and Bruno Fernandes are actually running on the left side. Marcus Rashford will get the ball, he'll dribble into the box and play a ball over to Bruno Fernandes, and Bruno Fernandes will score. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 passes. Very, very quick. So when Manchester United build out from the back, we actually use 2 different formations depending on the personnel we use. The most common one, and the one we use to play our best football, particularly after the restart, was this one. And this one means that one of your pivot forms a false back 3 with Maguire and Lindelof. In most cases, it was Matic in that scenario. We had Matic and Pogba play in the double pivot at that time, and we played some very good football in that period. So Matic forms a false back 3 with Maguire and Lindelof, and Paul Pogba will function in the single pivot. This allows our fullbacks to push up the pitch. So you can see Luke Shaw and Aaron Bissaka, for example, will be quite high up, and this gives you a lot of options in terms of passing. So if you have a false back 3 instead of a 2, what you end up having is a numerical advantage over the attacking midfielder and the striker who will press you. So it's really, really good for getting the ball and progressing it up the pitch. If you have 2 players there, the numerical advantage isn't there. So you end up having your fullbacks pushing deep, coming deeper for the ball. This, again, is a problem because you want to start your attacks on the front foot, and you don't get to do that when you have just 2 centre-backs there. So you have a false back 3. And Paul Pogba is excellent in the single pivot because he shifts from side to side. And when he picks up the ball with his back to goal, for example, he's able to turn. He has good feet, and he can see a pass very, very quickly. So Paul Pogba is very good in the single pivot.
Before you go on, Rachel, can I ask you, does this, are you saying it differs having a Matic and Pogba to when we have a Fred and McTominay? What are the differences there? I'm
going to show you that there's a second formation that we use with McTominay and Fred, and the difference is massive, and you're going to see it in a second. So this is an example of us playing the false back 3. This is against Everton. You can see Maguire here. Matic is actually on the left this time, and then you have Eric Bailly, and you have Paul Pogba in the single pivot. Now, when Paul Pogba is in this single pivot, obviously there's a player on him here, so actually the passing line to him is gone. But when you look at the formation here, you can see that Bruno Fernandes actually has the freedom to move across this area. So in this picture, Bruno Fernandes actually moved towards the left side, and he's dragged a midfielder with him. And Martial, who's playing on the right in this game, is actually able to come into the middle where there's a massive amount of space. And because of that, Maguire can just pass the ball straight to him. This gives Martial time to turn, which he does, and he dribbles a little bit and passes the ball to Cavani, who scores a fantastic goal against Everton. So you can see how we set up, quite standard. You have the false back 3, and you have Paul Pogba in the single pivot. Bruno Fernandes doing all his movements. He shifts to one side, and people have to follow him because you can't have Bruno Fernandes just hanging around on his own. You can't give him space. So because of this, Martial is able to drift into the middle for free. It's actually a very poor defensive shape by Everton, to be fair, but the principles are the same. Back 3, single pivot, Bruno Fernandes' freedom to move wherever he wants, and other players coming in to fill those vacant areas. So this was against Crystal Palace. Apologies because it was a bit foggy in this game, but this is a difference between having Paul Pogba and not having Paul Pogba. in this game, Matic and Fred played in the double pivot, and in the second half, we actually had McTominay come on. Now you can see there's a back three again: Eric Bailly, Nemanja Matic, Harry Maguire. So where is our single pivot? It's nowhere to be seen. McTominay in this has actually pushed right up the pitch. This means there is no passing line to the middle of the pitch, and it forces our fullbacks to come deeper than what they should. And you can see Luke Shaw here.
Does that happen with a Pogba and Matic at all? I know you've explained the positions that they've been in when the system's working, right? But is this something that happens no matter who's in the midfield, or is this something that is this a player problem? Is what I'm trying to say, a personnel problem.
So Paul Pogba is always operating around this area. A lot of people accuse Paul Pogba of being too deep at times, actually, and they get frustrated with it. But in the build-up play, Paul Pogba has the freedom to go forward once we progress the ball up the pitch. But when we're building out from the back, Paul Pogba is always in this position. Sometimes he's actually marked quite tightly. But if you have someone that's marking him and very close to him, it should open up space for other people to move into and pass the ball to them instead. So there's nothing wrong with Paul Pogba being marked as long as other players move into the right spaces, which is a problem we actually do have, which we'll go into as well. But overall, Paul Pogba would be in this position. McTominay's pushed so far up the pitch that actually there is no passing line to him. So it cuts out all the passing lines that would come from Paul Pogba being there, as well as like the passing line to him. So it forces us to go wide. And usually, which we saw in this game quite a bit, we end up passing side to side quite a lot. So that on its own, just not having Paul Pogba there and having someone else who's not capable of functioning in a single pivot, it actually causes us a massive problem right from the get-go. So this is the other formation we use, and this is a formation we use with McTominay and Fred quite often, because as we know, McTominay and Fred do not function in a single pivot very well. They're not very intelligent movers off the ball, and their passing is not great. So we end up forming double pivot here. And what this means is, because again we don't want our defenders to have a numerical disadvantage or be equal with the opposition attackers. So this forces our fullbacks to actually start off a lot deeper. This means that there's actually an isolation. Can you see that there's 4 players here? They're actually isolated. There's a massive amount of space, and the passing lanes are a lot longer. So this will force our front 4 to actually shift back and come deeper for the ball, which is something again that people complain about. Just from switching our double pivot, you actually get a situation like this, and it's really, really frustrating. And what it also causes is fatigue, because we know that the 4-2-3-1, as we spoke before, it specializes in overloads in defensive areas. When players are constantly having to come back and forth because they're isolated, you end up in a situation where players get very, very tired, especially Bruno. And Bruno, as you've seen very, very often, Bruno actually drops very, very deep when McFred are in midfield. And this is because they don't have the creativity. So he has to drop out of his position to go and aid them. But it also means that there's actually a hole in this area. And then our front 3 become isolated. So automatically, just from playing McTominay and Fred, you actually have a disadvantage straight away. And I'm going to show you this image here. So this is how we set up. It's not Bissaka, but you can see how deep our fullbacks are. Now, this clip really annoyed me, and this is actually a disgrace from both of them, because we are in possession here, and you can see McTominay is trying to mark Jamie Vardy. There is no passing line to McTominay. What McTominay and Fred should be doing is going into these areas so that when they receive the ball, Luke Shaw and Brandon Williams can push up the pitch. Instead, they're standing still, and they do this for a good few seconds, and this forces Maguire to pass sideways to Eric Bailly. So automatically, you can see that the position of our players is not good enough, and the football becomes very, very slow. So if McTominay goes into this position, Maguire can pass to him, and again, Brandon Williams can push up the pitch, and we can start progressing forward. We don't get to do that simply because these two, who are very close together, are standing still. So again, it's slow, it's boring to watch. We always complain about it, just passing out from the back pointlessly. This happens all the time with McFred. And it's not, to be fair to him, it's not just McFred. Like sometimes when Matic plays with like McTominay or Matic plays with Fred, sometimes they actually take up this formation as well. And again, Matic doesn't move a lot either. So it's not just these two. Matic has this problem as well. So it's a horrible problem to have, and it's a lack of intelligence here, because they're standing still. Again, they're not moving. Like players should be moving at all times. When you're playing out from the back, you need to get into areas where you can exploit the space and allow your players or your teammates to actually push forward, and they don't do that. So I'm going to show an example of why McFred is actually a massive problem in this midfield. So Bruno Fernandes, this is Bruno Fernandes here. Apologies for the quality of the picture, but Bruno's actually dropped really, really deep. He's dropped deeper than McFred here. So McTominay's here and Fred is here. Now Martial has actually shown for the ball. He's playing on the left in this game. Cavani's up top and Rashford's on the right. But Martial shows for the ball, which he does the right thing here to show for the ball. He comes forward. He actually picks up the ball, dribbles back towards Bruno Fernandes, and passes the ball back to Bruno. And this leaves a bit of space here. But look at McTominay and Fred. They haven't moved. What Fred should be doing is actually moving into this space here so that when Bruno passes to McTominay, there's a free pass in. But if you can see, McTominay hasn't moved at all. And Fred has actually moved to a position where he's actually useless. Because he's square and he's not on the half turn, he can't do anything with the ball here apart from pass back. If he's on the half turn, he can get the ball and he can move into space with the ball. He can't do that here because he's too square. So again, this is something that McTominay and Fred do all the time. Bruno comes deep. And what Bruno actually ends up doing is playing a diagonal ball towards our right inside forward, which is Rashford.
Yep.
And we lose possession. So this is a consistent.
It's something we see a lot, isn't it?
It is. It really is. And when people think I'm being horrible about McFred, I see this every game. I know some people see football differently, but when I watch these two play, it makes me physically sick because they do this all the time. Every now and then, to be fair to them, they will make, like Fred will occasionally make a line breaking pass. McTominay will do the same, but they don't do it consistently. And because of that, and because of the lack of intelligence in terms of moving around the pitch, you end up in a situation where we end up playing side to side a lot. And that's because of their lack of movement in midfield.
Can I ask you a question? A lot of people will say, well, we've got Donny van de Beek. His movement's incredible. Why would Ollie not be playing a McTominay and Van der Beek, or a Fred and Van der Beek? But have you got any theories behind that?
Actually, do you know what? So Donny van der Beek, even though he can play as a sort of more defense, not even a defensive player, but someone who can play a bit deeper in the midfield, his main instinct is to attack. He's an excellent mover he's excellent at moving around and finding space, especially in the box. So Donny van der Beek's instinct is actually to push forward quite a bit. And when Donny van der Beek pushes forward and you leave Matic, McTominay or Fred on their own, they can't hold a midfield on their own. They're not capable of doing it. So what you end up is a situation where you're actually defensively vulnerable. And I think Ollie has seen that and said, you know what, we need Donny van der Beek to actually just sort of learn to play the role differently, or he has to play as the 10. I think in some games it's perfectly viable to play Donny van der Beek there. I don't think Ollie's utilised him enough. I think he needs more chances to actually play. But from what I've seen of Donny, I like Donny a lot as a football player. I think he's an excellent football player. He's very, very intelligent. But in terms of fitting him into how we're playing, it's going to be very, very difficult because we don't have a defensive midfielder. Like, we have Matic, but he's way past it. He's too slow, and he actually hinders us at times as well. Again, the midfield issue isn't just McFred. Matic is a big part of the issue as well for me. So it's very, very difficult for Donny van der Beek to fit in. If we get a defensive midfielder and Donny plays alongside them, someone who can actually hold the defensive midfield position on his own, and then gives Donny the freedom to come back and forth as needed, then I think he will be able to be utilised in the system. But right now he can't be because we don't have the players for it. Yeah.
No, I'm just being objective. I need to ask the questions because those will be the questions. Those the questions people are asking. Why do you feel Donny van der Beek isn't playing? If that's the case, you were talking about more intelligent players. But yeah, listen, people. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, like the video, share it. Please do that. Please share it on your socials. We will get into comments as well, so I will flick through it and go through the comments afterwards. But you were saying, Rachel, sorry.
That's right. Right. So when you have a build-up formation, there's also an attacking formation. This is Manchester United's attacking formation. When we actually get the ball towards the final third, this is the position we like to be in. So we've seen it multiple times. We have our centre-backs actually on the halfway line. And then we have Pogba and Matic, for example, who will support and cover as necessary. So we know that Matic is better at covering. He's the more defensive-minded midfielder. And Pogba is someone that you want to get forward into the final third because he's dangerous in those areas. Again, Bruno Fernandes has the freedom to go to the left or to the right to support when needed. And our fullbacks will push up the pitch as well. And then our inside forwards will be in these areas, and that's attacking the half spaces. and obviously our striker can go wherever it's necessary. So it's very simple. But the problem is, how do we get from the build-up formation that we saw before to this one? And that involves using patterns of play.
Wait, you're not going to show us any, are you?
I don't know what you're talking about.
There's patterns of play to this one.
So a pattern of play is simply a sequence of passes used to progress the ball. And that's it. There's nothing special about patterns of play in terms of, basically, when you have a pattern of play on paper, you're not going to execute the pattern of play exactly how it is on paper, because on paper, it doesn't take into account whether a team plays a high line, whether they play like a mid block or a low block. It doesn't take into account the way they press. So you have a pattern of play, the sequence of passes, but it can be varied. So it can change according to what you need to do in the game. So depending on what the opposition team is and what the defensive style of play is. So we're going to have a look at this pattern of play. And this is a very common one we use. And it quite simply is, you play out from the back, David De Gea will play into the defense. And what you'll find is Harry Maguire will actually step into midfield. Very, very simple. When he steps into midfield, someone has to cover him. So in this situation, we put, say, Fred there. Fred's going to cover him in this area. When Harry Maguire gets the ball, usually on the left side, he prefers to play on the left. He will usually dribble into space here, but the actual passing line that he should go for is here, to Marcus Rashford or to Luke Shaw. When he does that, Marcus Rashford usually dribbles into this area. Again, it's very common. You can think of multiple times when Marcus Rashford's picked up the ball, tried to go past the player and dribble into this area. And what he will do is he will use the overlap of Luke Shaw. He'll either cut in and shoot, or he'll just play the ball to Luke Shaw, and Luke Shaw will get it across the goal. Luke Shaw's creativity this season symbolizes this pattern of play. He's been able to get into these positions constantly. And we're going to show you an example of it now. So Harry Maguire picks up the ball. Fred's here in this situation. This is against Liverpool in the FA Cup. We won 3-2. Oh, sorry, this is the one where we were 0-0, actually. And this is the Bruno chance when Bruno gets into the box and Alisson makes a very good save. So you can see Harry Maguire here has passed the ball straight down. He's gotten it to Marcus Rashford. And here he actually dribbles past, I don't think it's Trent, because Trent's actually the one over here, I think. Or maybe it's Trent. So he dribbles past him, and then he plays the ball on the overlap to Luke Shaw. And Luke Shaw will cross the ball in. He will play it to Bruno, and Bruno will make, and Alisson will make a very, very good save. And we did something similar against West Ham, only this time Harry Maguire actually passed the ball to Luke Shaw. Marcus Rashford plays a 1-2 with him, and Luke Shaw goes into this area here. He drives into the box. So the pattern's slightly different, but the general principle is the same. Attacking on the left side, getting Luke Shaw onto the ball, playing it with Marcus Rashford, and then getting into the box. Very similar situation, same pattern of play. This pattern of play is actually something that we only utilize really with Paul Pogba, because Paul Pogba is an excellent line breaker. And this one's a central pattern of play. Again, you form your false back three this time. Matic will be in there. Play out from the back. Pass it around the back three. And when there's an opportunity for Paul Pogba or Matic to make a line-breaking pass, usually to Bruno Fernandes, they will. And the reason why this is a line-breaking pass is because Bruno Fernandes will be in an area between the defense and the midfield. So Paul Pogba is very good at seeing this pass and executing it very quickly. Matic isn't so much. He actually takes a bit of time on the ball, and sometimes the passing line will actually be closed. And that causes us to slow the game down again. So Paul Pogba will play it into Bruno Fernandes. Bruno Fernandes will then link up usually with Martial or Rashford, because he tends to go towards the left side more so than the right. And then from that moment, it triggers a lot of different movements. So Luke Shaw will come to support. So will AWB on the right side. Paul Pogba will then move into this sort of space here. Greenwood has the option of moving into this space here as well, or making a run into the half space. And if he's linked with Martial, Marcus Rashford will go into the half space. There's a very simple pattern of play. It's direct, and there's like five passes going from David De Gea to Martial or Rashford. So do you think we've ever used this pattern of play before?
Do I think we've ever used it before?
Mm-hmm. Do you think we've ever executed this pattern of play before?
I think we have executed it, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a look at that now. So again, false back three, Matic is in the defense. Because Southampton are actually pushing us or pressing us high up the pitch, Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Luke Shaw have actually come back to support our defense. And when they do this, Paul Pogba shifts. He's in the single pivot again. He will shift towards the side of the ball. So he shifts towards Aaron Wan-Bissaka. When Paul Pogba receives the ball, he will play a line breaking pass to Bruno Fernandes. Bruno Fernandes is between the defense and the midfield. When Bruno Fernandes gets the ball, he will drive towards the box and he'll pass it to Martial. And Martial scores actually a wonderful goal against Southampton. And a lot of people would actually say this is a goal of individual brilliance. Martial cuts in and shoots and scores a great goal. But actually, if you look back, it's exactly this pattern. Back three, Paul Pogba gets the ball, line breaking pass to Bruno Fernandes. And then in the final third, Martial does his thing. Now, I want to speak about patterns of play a bit more, because what people don't seem to understand is that patterns of play do not always include the final third, like exactly around this area. What they actually do is get you to this area. And at this point, it depends on the attributes of your players. So again, Martial, Rashford, Greenwood, they all like to cut in and shoot. That's a standard thing for them. But for other players, such as Daniel James, who will try to cross the ball into the box, get the ball into the byline, and then cross it in, it's a different style of play for those individual players. So when you get to the final third, it's different for each player that's playing there. But patterns of play get you to the box. Once you get to the box, that's when you have your players have their individual qualities. And the better they are, the more often they will shoot and score goals, the more often they will make little patterns like 1-2s and whatnot in and around the box. That comes down to individual qualities. And that happens with every team. I think even Pep Guardiola himself
Pep said it. Pep said it. He said, I can get the players to the box, but after that is up to them.
Exactly.
He did say that.
Exactly. So patterns of play are used to get to the box. They're not used to literally walk the ball into the net. We're not Arsenal under Arsene Wenger, however many years ago. This is us now. This is how teams play football. In the final third, you get the ball to the box, and after that, it's about individual player quality. And just for a bit more of evidence that we actually play this way, again, Nemanja Matic plays a line-breaking pass to Bruno Fernandes. He's in between the defence and the midfield. Fred did it against West Ham. This led to Mason Greenwood's shot on goal, if you remember that one. Fred plays the ball into Bruno Fernandes. Bruno passes it to Mason Greenwood. Greenwood has a good shot, and it's a good save from the keeper. And this goal here as well, this is Paul Pogba. He actually does excellent here, Paul Pogba, because there's a player closing down very, very quickly. But he plays the ball into Bruno Fernandes. He flicks it onto Martial. And at this point, this is about individual player quality. Martial plays a 1-2 of Rashford, well executed by both of them, and Martial scores the goal. This is a pattern of play. This is the central pattern that we just discussed. And again, this one's really funny, actually. Do you remember the chance that Rashford had against West Brom, where he kept going back and forth and he wouldn't shoot? And everyone got really pissed off at him for it. This is that incident. So Fred plays a ball into Bruno. Bruno flicks it on to Marcus Rashford. You can see there's actually a lot of space here. It's actually criminal that Marcus Rashford didn't score for this. And the fact that he actually held up the play and allowed West Brom to get back into shape to close him down was actually really, really poor from him. So again, same pattern of play. Only difference is that we just didn't score from this, but we should have scored from this 100%. And this is something that needs to be addressed as well. We're playing against a low block here. And this is one of the few opportunities we had to actually just score a goal and try and get a win. And the fact that the decision-making of one of our players cost us is not the manager's fault. This is actually down to the player. And this happens often. There are a lot of things that our players do or don't do consistently that costs us games. And this is not down to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Some of it is actually players.
You're saying this, but you're, again, I'm gonna have to say again, you're pretty much Ollie out, aren't you? So you're more Ollie out than you are Ollie in. So yeah.
But my issues with Ollie don't come down to tactics. My issues with Ollie come down to the way he manages the team. I'm not a fan of how he does things as a manager. But as in terms of tactics, every single manager in world football at any level of football has tactics. They have a system, they have a plan, they have patterns of play. It's down to your players to execute them. If your players can't execute them consistently, then you're not good enough. And this is the problem that I have with a lot of our players. Our players can execute them against smaller teams or teams that give them a lot of space. But if they can't adapt those principles of play against teams that are better, who are more organized, then that means they're limited players and they should be replaced. So we're going to have a look at problems with this against low blocks. This pattern of play, sorry. So here's the first one. So Bruno Fernandes picks up the ball in a central area and he wants to link up with Martial. So Martial's here, Bruno is here, and this is Fred. Bruno wants to play a 1-2 with Martial. There's actually a bit of space here for Bruno to go into, and Bruno makes the run into this space. Martial should be playing this ball back. Instead, he passes back to Fred. Now, this allows West Brom to get back into shape, and now this passing line is closed. This happens often when we play against low blocks. They will rather play the ball short and backwards and go and run into the box and do nothing than to play these cute little balls here that are very, very good against low blocks. And a lot of teams do this. This is something that Lampard's team had an issue with. And it's actually something that Tuchel's team has a bit of an issue with as well, because what their players are doing, and they're playing short, easy passes back to where the ball came from, as opposed to trying to get into spaces where you can actually exploit the opposition team. This is a Sam Allardyce West Brom team. There are very few occasions where you can actually exploit space. And when you have those moments, you have to take them. Otherwise, you end up drawing or losing games. So little things like this, really, really frustrating. And it's not just one player. It's not just Martial. It's not just Rashford. It's not just McFred. There are a lot of players that do this in our team. And it's really, really frustrating. And we end up just going backwards, side to side. And West Brom just get back into their shape very, very quickly. This was against Crystal Palace. I believe this was in the first half. And again, Bruno Fernandes is in between the lines. Matic should be passing into this space. Bruno Fernandes is on the half turn. It means that he can pick up the ball and instantly face the goal. He can shoot. He can play Cavani in, who's sort of in this area here between the centre backs, or he can play the ball wide. Matic plays the ball sideways. So again, Crystal Palace get to go back into their position. These passing lines are now closed. So we end up going backwards, sideways. Crystal Palace get back into their shape. It's boring again, and nothing useful comes out of it again. This is another incident against Crystal Palace again. Marcus Rashford in this area here. He doesn't. So you can see that actually that they've got Crystal Palace, they've got 3, 6, 7, 8 players. And this comes from this pass here. Matic passing it to Marcus Rashford, and then Marcus Rashford passing it to Aaron Wan-Bissaka. So you can see there's a bit of space here for Bruno Fernandes where he can play the ball in. And then now you can see how compact Crystal Palace are. Crystal Palace want us to get the ball in wide areas because we know that our players haven't got the best crossing ability. We don't cross much as a team. Even with Cavani's in the game, we don't cross often enough for him, and the quality of cross is not good enough. So Crystal Palace are happy for us to have it in wide areas. They don't care. And when you look at the players that we have, you have Marcus Rashford, you have Bruno here, and Cavani, and then you have, 8 players here that are marking 3 players. It's very easy for them to defend against it. So again, we end up going sideways, backwards, nothing useful comes from it. This one, again, I apologize for the quality of this, but this is just the fogginess from that game. And it's something very, very minor, but it actually affects us in this game massively. So Nemanja Matic picks up the ball here, and Maguire is actually in front of him. Now there's a massive amount of space here, and Matic could actually pass the ball into this area and have Maguire run onto it. Instead, he plays a very, very slow ball to Maguire's feet, which means that Maguire doesn't get to turn and go into that space quick enough. So Maguire passes the ball to Bruno Fernandes. The second pass is actually really poor quality because he passes it straight here. Bruno Fernandes is here. Bruno Fernandes has to come back. When Bruno Fernandes comes back into this position, Crystal Palace push up the pitch. And that means that the space here is closed off, and then Bruno Fernandes has to go sideways again. So you can see it here. I've circled the Crystal Palace players. So you can see they actually close it off very quickly, and then Bruno Fernandes ends up passing it back to Matic. So now, we are in the same position as we were before. Only this time Matic is just going to play it sideways. So again, we're not progressing the ball up the pitch quick enough. And it's really frustrating. Players need to be going into spaces, picking up the ball and trying to progress the ball. And again, they don't do it.
It's easy to see why people think we don't have any patterns of play or we don't have a system, because it does seem like that, doesn't it? You can see that. It's just the repetitive. We don't move. The ball goes back to where it came from. Again, ball comes in, goes back to where it came from. Side to side play. So it looks as if it's a system issue, when in reality, it's a player decision making problem.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. And the thing is, people will say, "Why aren't these players coached?" They are being coached. If you've got patterns of play and they are repetitive, there are certain triggers. Basically, when the ball gets to a certain point, there are certain triggers for players to make runs. if players can't adapt to certain situations in the game, that means they have very limited footballing intelligence. The most intelligent players in football will adapt what they know from the patterns of play and then apply them to a real match situation. Because not everything that happens on paper on a pattern of play is going to be applied in real life. Different things are at play there. You have different different pressing, different kinds of pressing, different defensive lines. Every team has their own defensive system. They have their own strengths and their own weaknesses. It's down to you as a football player to exploit those weaknesses. So this idea that everything can be coached is nonsense. McTominay, Fred, they don't have the footballing intelligence to consistently play the right kinds of passes, make the right kinds of decisions. That doesn't mean that they should leave Manchester United. What it means is that they're not starting 11 players, and they are definitely not starting 11 players at the highest level of football. If we want Manchester United to be, going for league titles, going for Champions Leagues, those two players cannot be starting for us. They can come in for certain games if they have a specific role, but they cannot be starting for us on a regular basis. We need cover. We need midfielders that can actually do something in the game consistently against these kinds of teams. Right. So this situation here actually ended up with Marcus Rashford hitting the ball just wide. It's when he's in this sort of area here and he puts the ball wide. Now, for him to get the ball in this situation, Luke Shaw has to play a perfect pass to him. You can see there are 5 players between Luke Shaw and Marcus Rashford, right? Marcus Rashford steps into this area and Luke Shaw goes a little bit forward and he has to play a ball straight across. And it goes past 5 players. It's an excellent pass from Luke Shaw. However, Marcus Rashford is actually starting in the wrong position. He should be in this place here. He should be making a run in behind here so that when he gets the ball, he can go into the half space and get the ball across to Cavani, who will probably make a run across the face of goal. Very, very standard. Marcus Rashford shouldn't be in this position. So even though it does end up with a chance, the fact that it required Luke Shaw to make the perfect chance doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is Marcus Rashford should be making a run into this area, and he doesn't do it. This is something that's, again, is a problem with our front three. They come too central. So many times we see Marcus Rashford, Martial, Cavani, and then say Greenwood all occupying the same area. When you're playing against a low block, you need intelligent movement. You need to create space for others. Marcus Rashford in this situation is not making the right run. He has to be going into this area here so he can go into the half space and get the ball across the face of goal. You'd have late runners. Bruno Fernandes will be running in there as well. All sorts of things can happen. You can cut back to Bruno and get the ball across the face of goal to Cavani. There are multiple options. The fact that Luke Shaw had to play a ridiculously good pass to him and it actually got through to him is more of a miracle in itself. And again, Marcus Rashford in that situation still should have scored or at least got on the ball on target, and he didn't, which was really frustrating. So decision making, lack of intelligent movement, this always affects us against low blocks. And here's another thing that affects us against low blocks, the fact that we don't have Paul Pogba. I cannot stress this enough. When I said to you that in the double pivot, you need someone who's creative, Paul Pogba is that person. Now, Paul Pogba is not a perfect player by any means, but he is a fantastic player. And he has multiple abilities. He can dribble. He can play a long pass like this. You can see Tottenham's shape here. There's actually very few places he can actually pass to where there's a lot of space for him to progress the ball. He'd have to pass backwards. But Paul Pogba is a player that can see this sort of pass and make it. He executes his pass more often than not. He's a fantastic long passer, but he can also dribble. He can also play the short passes. He can do a multitude of things. Again, Fred, McTominay, and Matic can't do that. And this is why if Paul Pogba leaves and we get a defensive midfielder, it's still not good enough. We need someone who can do what Paul Pogba does as well as an option. And we don't have that. So this is why we struggle. Against low blocks, you need someone that can do something different. So when we play McTominay, Fred, and Matic, again, no creativity, no consistency of pass, poor movement. Paul Pogba will make the movements. He does it often as well. And
he's unpredictable, right? He's unpredictable.
Yeah.
The opposition don't know what he's going to do. Whereas I would say Fred and McTominay are very predictable in the way that they play. So
yeah, absolutely.
What do you do when it comes? If you're the guy who's responsible for Pogba, what do you do? Do you close him down quickly because he's going to hold the ball up? He's going to get the ball past you. You might dive in and he's going to be able to drive with the ball, or he's going to see you coming. He's going to know you're coming. He has that sixth sense. If you know what I mean, that football intelligence to quick look over the shoulder if he needs to, and he can play that ball as almost a blind pass sometimes if he needs to.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
exactly.
He can execute the passes, drive with the ball when he needs to, hold the ball up, keep the ball moving. He already knows where the ball's going before it gets to him. So he's unpredictable, whereas Fred and McTominay are not. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And usually people deal with him by trying to press him with two different players.
Yeah.
Pressing him with one player, he can get past them. If they get too tight to him, he can just turn and he'll shrug them off. We've seen him shrug them off so many times.
Yes,
Whenever he's lost the ball in the middle of the pitch because he's been pressed, there's usually a couple of factors, and not all of them are Paul Pogba's fault. Absolutely right. Sometimes he holds on to the ball too long sometimes. But there's also the fact there's not a lot of movement in front of him. When he's looking around for a pass, like you said, normally he can see what's happening before he's going to make the pass. But if there's no movement, then what is exactly that he's going to be seeing to pass into? If players aren't making the right movements, he has to play the ball back. Usually, he would play the ball back. He does it quite a lot. But sometimes he doesn't. He holds onto the ball too long and he loses it. That's probably one weakness of Paul Pogba's that he does need to sort out. But we haven't seen that in the last few months. He hasn't been doing that recently. He's actually gotten a lot better at it anyway. And he's an intelligent football player. He can adapt to different situations, something that our other midfielders cannot do. So he's just an excellent football player.
I was making this point earlier today. Creativity is not only the person who's on the ball.
Yeah.
Right? It's where the ball's going. It's to the person where the ball is going. So their movement has to be good as well. It's no good. It's no good having a Paul Pogba in the midfield with players stood up top together in the same space. You gain nothing from that, right?
No, absolutely. Do you know what the thing is, right? A lot of people use Pep Guardiola's Manchester City or Pep Guardiola's teams in general as sort of the benchmark, right? Now, Pep Guardiola is not someone he's not a manager that likes to have too many ball carriers in the midfield. He'll have them in like wider areas, but in the midfield, he likes passers and movers. He likes people who are intelligent on and off the ball. Now, here's the thing. If Pep Guardiola came to Manchester United tomorrow and he didn't have the backing that he would have at Manchester City, which he wouldn't, and he tried to play his style of football with our players, it wouldn't work. He would actually fail at Manchester United. And this is not me saying it like hyperbolically. This is just pure facts. Because the thing is, we don't have the players to implement his style of play. We don't have the players to do it. Our players struggle in a system where we only play 4 to 5 passes to try and get to the final third. How are these players going to function when you have slower transitional movements to progress the ball, where you have to constantly be moving and passing the ball accurately? It doesn't happen. It will not happen with these players. So there's more to football than just working hard and winning the ball back. When you're on the ball, when you're attacking, you have to be able to pass the ball, see the pass, make the pass, and have the players around you with the right movements in order to make that pass function. There's so much more than just, being able to win the ball back in midfield. That's not how Guardiola teams work. They can win the ball back, but really their best attributes are their passing and movement abilities. Their intelligence on the ball is incredible. So with Pep Guardiola's teams as well, a lot of people say that their players are overrated. I've heard it recently because we beat them, people think they're overrated. This is a team that didn't actually play that well against us and still created a crap ton of chances, by the way. They had a lot of good chances. Raheem Sterling had 2 chances that he probably should have scored one from. Gabriel Jesus had a chance to score. Phil Foden had a chance to score. That game was them not playing well, but they still created chances because they have players that are excellent on the ball, and they can see those moments. Whenever there's a chance for them to score, they can still try and take them. They have the players to try and create those chances still. So there's a lot more than just, being able to pass the ball side to side. You have to be able to move well as well. So we're going to speak about this pattern of play, and this is a wide pattern of play. And this pattern of play is something that we use quite often on the left side. Patterns of play can be mirrored. So this can happen on the right side as well. But again, we don't have the players on the right side to actually use this pattern of play often. So usually it comes through with Marcus Rashford. And again, it's quite simple. David De Gea will pick up the ball. He'll play to one of our 3. And we'll try and get the ball into this side here. When we get the ball to this side, Luke Shaw will come into the half space in this area here. He will step into midfield. Very similar to what Cancelo does for Manchester City, actually. He'll step into midfield and he will drag the winger with him. When this happens, Maguire will play the ball to Marcus Rashford. And this is the widest you will ever see Marcus Rashford. We spoke about this in the Bruno player focus. Marcus Rashford only comes wide when he gets to the halfway line. So when he picks up the ball, again, this will trigger certain events to happen. So Paul Pogba, if Marcus Rashford needs a bit of support in this area, Paul Pogba will actually go into this space here and try and support him. Otherwise, if he doesn't need it, Marcus Rashford has the option of dribbling. Or he can play the ball into Martial. Martial will drop deeper because Bruno Fernandes will go into the area vacated by Marcus Rashford. So there are multiple options here from this position. When Marcus Rashford dribbles with the ball, he usually comes inside. He doesn't actually use the wide area that often. This gives Luke Shaw the opportunity to actually make a run down the left on the overlap. Or he can use Bruno Fernandes' run as well. So usually you'd have Martial. We've spoken about Martial and Rashford's link-up play. Martial always comes and shows for the ball for Marcus Rashford, always. He's very, very good at it, and they link up very, very well. From there, you have space. Because he's operating between the lines again in the Bruno role, he has a fantastic area where he picks up the ball and he can do anything here. He can play to the right side. Paul Pogba can run into space. He can play to the fullback, or he can play it towards the left, towards Bruno Fernandes. So there are multiple options here. And we're going to show you a couple of examples of this pattern of play varied. So again, with a pattern of play, it depends. Like, you can utilize this pattern of play in any way you want. However, you have to take into account the defensive line. So when I'm using these examples here, this is a very, very deep defensive line. But when you have a defensive line that's actually higher up, you can start to bring out long balls. Marcus Rashford can pass the ball to Mason Greenwood. If the line's higher, he can actually switch the play. And we've seen Marcus Rashford do this quite a few times as well. So this one here is against Real Sociedad. They're playing a high line here. And again, Greenwood, who's playing as a striker, is dropping deeper to try and link up with Marcus Rashford. There's a straight passing line here that Rashford could have used. And that will have Greenwood set off against the back four. But he goes for the pass over to Bruno Fernandes because Bruno Fernandes is now running into the half space. When Bruno Fernandes runs into here and receives the ball, it actually leads to our first goal in the first leg. It's a very good goal, and it's part of a pattern of play. You can't see Luke Shaw in his picture because he's somewhere over here. But he comes inside, and this gives Marcus Rashford a free pass from our back line. So very, very simple pattern of play there. This one here is us actually counter-attacking. Now, when you counter-attack, your principles of play are exactly the same as what they are when you're not counter-attacking, when you're actually building up. It's the same sort of thing, only you're doing it much quicker with a numerical advantage. So Bruno Fernandes picks up the ball deep. Marcus Rashford, again, is very, very wide. He plays the ball through. Brighton are actually playing quite high up here because I think they had a set piece at this point. But Marcus Rashford picks up the ball and literally just makes a run in. And this is when he scores against Brighton as well. The same sort of thing. Marcus Rashford is only ever wide on the halfway line. And this one's against Liverpool in the... this one's the one in the FA Cup. Marcus Rashford, again, at his widest, is on the halfway line. And he passes it to Mason Greenwood. He switches the play. Mason Greenwood's making a run in behind. Now, the reason why Marcus Rashford's actually gone for this pass is because Cavani hasn't shown for the ball. He's actually making a run, trying to go in behind the defense. But Donny van de Beek, who's playing the Bruno Fernandes role, is not in the area that Rashford's vacated. So his only option is actually to go for Mason Greenwood, and he executes it. And it's actually a very good goal that we score here. But when we speak about Cavani and Martial, I know a lot of people like to compare the two. One's like a proper striker and one isn't. But they both have strengths and weaknesses. Martial is better at linking up and dealing with the build-up play than what Cavani is. When it comes to our patterns of play, Martial is actually more functional in that area. However, in the box, Cavani is much better. His movement in the box is superior to Martial's in every way. So you have two players that have both got strengths and weaknesses, and it's which one you value more, basically. And I don't think Ollie's actually made up his mind on that one either. So in terms of Cavani and Martial, I understand both sides of the argument, but I'm staying out of that one because they both have strengths and weaknesses with it. So we're going to go through the problems against low blocks with this.
Rachel, before we move on, can we just get to Bob's question?
Yeah, sure.
He's asking, how often are we seeing patterns of play, Rachel?
It depends on who we're playing, to be honest with you. So with McTominay and Fred, or with Matic and McTominay or Matic and Fred, we see other patterns of play a lot less often. And it's simply because they don't spot the patterns of play. They don't spot, the passes as quickly as, say, a Paul Pogba does. And it's not just Paul Pogba. Sometimes Paul Pogba doesn't always spot the passes, But over the course of 90 minutes, you'll actually find Paul Pogba will attempt those passes more often than the others. So, you know, them against West Ham, I showed you a line-breaking pass that Fred made to Bruno Fernandes, and then Bruno passed it to Greenwood for the shot. Fred probably made one line-breaking pass in that game, and it was that one. McTominay made one switch of the play in that game. I think it was in the first half. So over 90 minutes, both players haven't made more than one progressive pass, like a genuinely good attempt at a progressive pass. It's once in a game. Paul Pogba, how often do you see Paul Pogba go for a long pass? It's standard with Paul Pogba. When Paul Pogba goes for a line-breaking pass, it is standard. And that's why people don't speak about it enough, because when Paul Pogba does something so natural, so easily, people don't realize just how important it is for the team. They think it's just Paul Pogba, and I understand that, but midfielders should be doing that anyway. If you're a decent midfielder, you should be able to see those passes and execute them. But McFred and Matic don't do it enough. So actually, when they're playing, we don't see it often, and it basically cuts out the patterns of play, right? The central pattern of play basically disappears when they're playing. So again, It's really frustrating to deal with, and it causes just a ridiculous amount of issues where we end up passing side by side, or side to side, sorry. So I'm going to have a look at this issue here. Oh,
can I just ask you one more thing? So some people would say, well, it's Ollie's job now to get the best out of these players. Why can't he come up with different patterns of play? Why can't he change the system to suit those? Because we spoke a lot about Fred and McTominay, right? And being able to execute these patterns. Why can't Ollie come up with a system to get these players kicking on or breaking passes, passing lines, or to get the best out of what he has got? Or is he doing that?
So when you talk about system, do you mean a formation with the patterns of play? Because basically different formations utilize different patterns of play. These patterns of play that I'm showing you guys are actually standard for a 4-2-3-1. So any team that's used a 4-2-3-1 utilize these patterns of play.
So okay then. So why hasn't Ollie changed the formation then?
Because we don't have the players to do it. So if we were to go for, say, all right, so if we go for a 4-3-3, everyone seems to want a 4-3-3. Now, the 4-3-3 is not a... So basically, when I spoke about the 4-2-3-1 having overloads and half spaces, the 4-3-3 doesn't do that. The 4-3-3, when you talk about your central midfielders, you usually have a defensive midfielder, a box-to-box midfielder, say, and a more attacking midfielder. But in the modern game, actually, what you actually find is that you don't get an out-and-out 10 anymore. You actually get an 8-10 hybrid. And a lot of teams use these 8-10 hybrids quite often. And basically what it means is that instead of being a traditional 10, you actually track back and you have a lot of defensive responsibilities. Now, we don't have those players. We have players that either have one half of what you need, but not the other half. We have very limited players. If you play, say, McTominay, Pogba, and Matic as a 3, what you'll find is Matic will be the defensive midfielder. That's fine. But McTominay will be a box-to-box midfielder that can shoot. But when you talk about link-up play and his ability to create when he gets forward, he's actually still very limited. Yes, he can shoot. He's got a fantastic shooting technique, but is that really all he brings to it? He gets up and down the pitch, fair enough. But when he's further up the pitch, it actually takes away his defensive responsibilities that he's actually shown he's very good at. So you take away a lot of his defensive attributes just for his ability to shoot. That's what you do in a 4-3-3 for McTominay. So is it worth it? Is it really worth playing a 4-3-3 and dropping Bruno Fernandes in that situation as well when Bruno's such a creative player? Is it worth it? If you play Matic, Paul Pogba, and say Bruno Fernandes, and you have Paul Pogba and Bruno Fernandes as 8/10s, you'll end up in a situation where Matic is again isolated. He is not a single pivot defensive midfielder.
No,
so exactly. So he needs someone to play alongside him as well. We have one defensive midfielder, that's Matic. We need someone to play alongside him. The McFred combination is literally there because they both win the ball back very quickly. So it allows us to press higher up the pitch. And our defensive line gets to be higher. That's why you play them together. So basically, there is no combination of midfielders that we have that is solid. There's always a massive problem with it. Pogba and Matic is a problem because defensively, they're not good enough. Matic is too slow, both play like Paul, as good as Paul Pogba is at like tracking back and whatnot. When it comes to getting across the ground very quickly, he's not that player. He's not a quick player. He's not an explosive player. It's very difficult for him to stop and start quickly. So Pogba and Matic defensively are not good enough. McTominay and Matic, it's very pragmatic, not a lot of creativity. Matic, Fred, same issue. McFred, same issue. So we don't have a balanced midfield where we can actually interchange between them and without sacrificing something. That's why you don't change the formation. The patterns of play are there, the system is there, and the 4-2-3-1 gives advantages in the defensive areas so that we don't concede too many goals. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's a question I've got to ask. I have to ask it.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. So this is another issue with us against low blocks. Now, this is against West Brom, and the reason why I picked West Brom and Crystal Palace is because both games were shambolic in terms of our attacking play. They were horrible games for us to play. Like, I know we lost 6-1 to Spurs, but we were still more useful offensively than what we were in these games, and we had 10 men against Spurs. So, again, this starts off with Marcus Rashford on the left side. He passes the ball to Fred, who then passes the ball to Mason Greenwood here. Now, from the time Marcus Rashford passes this ball to Fred, and then Fred passes to Greenwood, Marcus Rashford he's actually gone forward just a few yards. Nothing major. But when Mason Greenwood gets the ball here, West Brom don't even care that he has the ball. They want us to play the ball wide. Their aim is to get us to play the ball to Wan-Bissaka so that when he crosses the ball into the box, they have a massive numerical advantage in the box. So we have to find a way to try and play centrally and try and drag players out of position. So this shape that we have here is disgustingly bad, because what's happened here is Rashford has ran into an area where there are 3 players around him. And McTominay's in an area where there are 5 players around him. They do not add anything to this. Now, if this is a situation where you have like KDB and say Sterling, for example, where KDB picks up the ball in this area, he will play a ball towards the back post and Sterling will usually score from it, right?
Yeah.
We don't have these players here. Greenwood picks up the ball and he's actually forced to play the ball wide to Aaron Wan-Bissaka. He doesn't have the passing capability in the final third to play this ball to Marcus Rashford. And Marcus Rashford doesn't actually have any intention of making this run either. So again, passing quality and movement is not good enough. So he passes it to Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Aaron Wan-Bissaka will cross the ball into the box. And again, West Brom have all these players back. They don't care. They'll deal with it, and they did. So it's very, very simple. This is the problem we have against low blocks. Players are not moving to the right positions. Like, what is the point in being in this position here from McTominay? He's too square. If he receives the ball, he has to play it back. His only option is to play it back. If he's on the half turn again, he can go into this area, and then he has an opportunity to do something. Because at that point, you take out 3 players, and all of a sudden it's 6 versus 3 as opposed to 3 versus 9. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, so no, I'm with you. I'm definitely with you. One of my biggest frustrations is with when we see Cavani, because Cavani knows this. So when this happens, when Cavani's up top, he's always pulling right to the right. He naturally goes right anyway, but he pulls to the right to get into space or to take a player with him to create space for somebody else.
Exactly.
It's a huge problem because sometimes our midfielders can have it, and Bruno's in there as well. Bruno, he'll be dropped off a little bit, but for me, that's still the same space. There's nothing wrong. These players should know by now not to stand in each other's spaces. Even Rashford pulls wide. Just stand out wide. Just make that defender think.
Just pull him because do you know what it is as well? If Luke Shaw is actually standing here, like he actually should be going further up the pitch. That's actually really poor from Luke Shaw. But if Marcus Rashford pulls to the wide areas, Luke Shaw can push into a half space, or he can go into the central areas. He can try and do something more useful. The fact that Luke Shaw is walking when we're on the attack and we are not winning in this game is really, really poor from our players. And this is a problem that we have every single game. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, why doesn't Ollie tell them to move? I can assure you that he does. This is a manager who was a fantastic striker who exploited space on a regular basis. Do you honestly think that he's not going to tell his forward players especially not to move? It is not possible. These are ex-professional football players. They know exactly what they're supposed to do on the pitch. Good football players. Michael Carrick was an excellent football player. He was the guy that stop players from exploiting space. He knows exactly what to do. It is
Yeah.
down to our players to do that on the pitch, to adapt the principles that they've learned on the training ground and apply it to the pitch. It's like, say for example, you have a great maths teacher, right? And he teaches you all the methods and all the principles that you need for algebra. If you do not apply that to your exam, that's not your teacher's fault. He's taught you everything that he needs to teach you. If you do not apply that to your exam and you end up failing your exam, it's because you haven't adapted those principles to another situation.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I read a Haaland quote the other day, and he was saying how pivotal Ollie was personally in his movements, in attacking the spaces, attacking the ball. And that's what he thinks about all the time. But you've also got to have that natural instinct for it. It's you've got to have the football brain. You've got to be able to think like, okay, if I move here and see 3 or 4 passes ahead or 3 or 4 steps ahead of where the ball's going to go. Some players don't have that. Not everybody has that.
And the thing is, it's not me saying that McFred should just retire from football. I'm not saying that. I'm literally saying that there are players on our team that are not good enough at the highest level. For the level that we're at now, you can see it. A lot of our fans wanted us to push for a title this season because we were top of the league in January. Now, a lot of people who understood the poor players in this squad knew that this wasn't going to be sustainable, that we were actually just going to drop off. However, if you have players, say in January, if this club had any ambition whatsoever to maintain that top spot, you bring in a player to actually push us forward and maybe try and get a title. But our board isn't interested in that. They don't care. So we end up in a situation where we fall off inevitably because our players are not good enough. And when Paul Pogba got injured, I nearly cried, honestly, because I had a really bad feeling that something like this was going to happen, and we were just going to be full of these horrible performances that no one wants to see. So yeah.
So
and just
go on. Sorry, I was just going to say, do you think the coaches and the manager can or should do anything about this, or are they doing anything about this when we see 3 or 4 players in the same space?
Well, I'm going to show you something now, and this is going to really amuse a lot of people. So this is a goal Marcus Rashford scores against Norwich. Now, this is at Old Trafford. Mata is in the same position that Greenwood was in, right? And Marcus Rashford is here.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this goal, but Marcus Rashford scores a goal very similar to the KDB/Sterling goal. Because Mata, who is a fantastic passer of the ball, gets the ball towards the back post, and Marcus Rashford makes the run. So this proves to me that our players are very much capable of making these runs. This is not a coaching issue now. Like, if you can see that a player has made these runs before and they choose not to make the runs next time, this is a player issue. This is a player, whether it's an attitude issue, a mentality issue, a laziness, I don't care what it is, this is a player issue because Marcus Rashford has actually made this run before and he chose not to do it before, in this West Brom game.
Do you think it's also down to who they see on the ball? So, like a Mason Greenwood, does he believe Mason Greenwood can make that pass, whereas he knows Mata can make that pass? It's worth running. Do you think it's anything to do with that?
It could be that, but again, wouldn't that be a player issue? That's not a coaching issue.
No, it's still a player issue.
Yeah, exactly. We still need a right winger, because a lot of our right wingers or the players that play on that right side they're playing out of position anyway. So, yeah. So this is against West Brom again. This is really, really bad from multiple players here. So Marcus Rashford's received the ball. He's square, but he actually has the ability to turn. We know Marcus Rashford, he's right-footed. He can turn into this space here with the ball. He can also play the ball to Bruno Fernandes. Now, McTominay's position is a joke. McTominay should be here.
Yep.
Because if McTominay goes here and Bruno's already going into this space, he could just literally, Rashford plays the ball to McTominay. McTominay can play the ball into Bruno here in a lot of space. McTominay standing here does nothing. Literally nothing. And it's poor movement and it's poor decision making yet again. Marcus Rashford, though, he dribbles into this area, past the two players, and he passes the ball backwards. So you can see from this, there's nothing. You start over and West Brom get back into shape. Now Marcus Rashford has options. He can literally pass the ball to Wan-Bissaka, and Wan-Bissaka could play it down the line. Wan-Bissaka could make a run down the line, and Marcus Rashford could play it off to him. Or Marcus Rashford could play the ball to Bruno. Or McTominay comes into position and Rashford can play the ball to McTominay, who will then play it to Bruno. That's 4 options that you have there. And the option that we end up going with because of a lack of movement and poor decision making is backwards.
Yeah, because if McTominay's deeper and Wan-Bissaka makes the run, goes past him, then Bruno can make that run, and the fullback's got a decision to make, right?
Exactly.
Right now, they're all comfortable, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly.
All of the defenders, the opposition, they're all comfortable with where everyone is, where the ball is, where the players are, and that's something we need to get away from. You have to make defenders think, otherwise they're happy. They're happy defending like that.
Exactly. If the play that I would have probably gone for in this situation, well, first of all, if I was McTominay, I'd be here.
Yeah.
But Rashford would play the ball to McTominay, and he will make a run into the half space here, and then Bruno or Wan-Bissaka will get the ball in the wide areas. All of a sudden, you'd have Rashford, McTominay will make a drive into the box. I think that's Cavani there. Cavani will go into the box, and you have options, and that's a goal scoring opportunity that you could potentially make. The fact that we've gone backwards and started over, and West Brom have gotten back into shape, just another example of why low blocks are so difficult for us to deal with. This is not a system issue. This is a player issue. A player making poor decisions and passing backwards again.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly frustrating. Like, it happens every single time we play.
Not just that positional sense as well, right?
Yeah, positional sense, movement, just general like poor all around. It's really bad. So this is a different pattern of play, and this one's a little bit different because this is a pattern that we use if we're playing so when I spoke about the build-up play formations, there was the false back three, and then there was just the back four. This one's with a back four. So this is common when we play with McFred. So David De Gea will pass it out to Maguire or Lindelof, and our whole team will sort of shift to one side if we want to play it wide. So you'd have McFred shifting to this side. You'd have Greenwood coming deep. Bruno Fernandes will go into the area vacated by Mason Greenwood. And what this does is because Mason Greenwood's pulled the fullback deep, and because Bruno Fernandes has gone into this area, it pulls a midfielder with him, and this creates space in the middle of the pitch. And at this point, Martial or Rashford can come into this area. Luke Shaw will push up the pitch. Aaron Wan-Bissaka will push up the pitch.
Yep.
And we're going to show an example of this now. So this was against Aston Villa, and this is slightly different in the pattern. And this is because Paul Pogba has had to come deep because McFred are not creating in this area. They are not finding the passes. Paul Pogba comes deep again. This is the one where he flicks it over the player and headers it to Marcus Rashford for our goal. Do you remember it?
Yep.
Right.
I remember that.
So when we looked at this pattern here, if you take Paul Pogba in Bruno's position, Paul Pogba's dropped deep to this sort of area here, right? Which means that no one is dragging the fullback, dragging the defender, the midfielder out of position. So because of that, the midfielder is actually coming deep with Paul Pogba, and he flicks it over their heads. This is a brilliant piece of skill from Paul Pogba. He headed it to Marcus Rashford, and because Paul Pogba's vacated the area in the middle of the pitch, Aaron Wan-Bissaka now makes a run into the middle of the pitch, and he goes straight down the line, and he passes it back to Martial, who makes a run and headers it into the Aston Villa goal. This is a pattern of play, and they've adapted it. So this is what I mean about intelligent football players, right? Paul Pogba's had to come deep to help our pivot because they're not creating anything. He's done a fantastic bit of skill, and he's played the ball to Marcus Rashford. And Aaron Wan-Bissaka did really well here because instead of going on the outside where it was kind of pointless, he actually came inside into the space. It was actually very good from him. And then Paul Pogba plays the ball to Marcus Rashford. Rashford plays the ball to Wan-Bissaka. And this leads to our goal. So the patterns are there. The problem is that Paul Pogba has had to come deep in the first place. Like this thing here, like you can see McTominay and Fred, right? Like they've shifted towards that side. We're trying to play on the right side, and they're too close together, and they're not actually in a position to actually do anything. They're just standing there. Like Fred, for example, should be here. There's a massive amount of space here. When Paul Pogba has the ball, if he passes it back to McTominay and McTominay passes to Fred, the ball should be going into this area. But again, Fred is just standing there. McTominay is not doing much either. No one is exploiting this space. There's a massive amount of space here. So we go towards the right side, we make the play, and then we score from this goal. Very, very simple. And just to add to like sort of the intelligence aspect of it, we're going to have a look at Juan Mata in a very similar situation against Newcastle. So we're playing on the right side, and McFred have shifted over. McTominay does really well on this little bit of play, actually. But you can see Juan Mata is here. He's come deep onto the halfway line, as we spoke about before. Our players are normally wide. Our inside forwards are normally at their widest when they're at the halfway line. So McTominay plays the ball to Mata, and he makes a run into this space here. This is a good run. And then Fred will shift to this area. Now, Bruno Fernandes is on the right side, so he's going into the area vacated by Mata again. Oh, sorry. So Bruno Fernandes has had to drop deep. And the reason why he's had to drop deep is because there are too many players in this area around him. He can't actually do anything here. And Wan-Bissaka is standing still. Yeah, exactly. And Wan-Bissaka is standing still. There's also another issue. You see this space here?
Yep.
Martial should be in this space. He has to drop deep to try and get the ball. Do you remember we spoke about the pattern before? Mm-hmm. Martial or Rashford drops deep. Martial should be dropping deep here. This position here is really poor. There is not really a clear passing line to get to him. And when he does get the ball, because he's going to be isolated, he won't get the time to turn and sort of attack. So he should be in this area. And watch Martial in these 3 images. So there are 4 blades of grass from the halfway line to Martial. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4. He has barely moved. 1, 2, 3, 4. He's barely moved in this play. He's barely moved. It's really, really poor. And in that time, Bruno Fernandes has dropped deep to support. Mata has run all the way around, and we played the ball around back to where we basically started. But this time, because Mata is a very intelligent player, he's actually managed to pick up the ball in space, and he runs towards the Newcastle defense. But the pattern of play is the same. But our players, because Mata and Bruno are actually very intelligent players, they've adapted that pattern because Martial simply did not make the run that he needed to make. You see what I mean? Yep. So the more intelligent your players are, the more they can adapt the principles they've learned on the training ground to a real match situation.
Yep.
So if you have, say, Daniel James in that situation, and then you have, say, McTominay in that situation, does this happen? No. What we end up having is a situation where we actually pass the ball back again. So you need intelligent players on the pitch. Intelligent players do well with other intelligent players. It makes common sense.
Yeah, I still think our best goal this season was between Donny, Wan-Mata, and Bruno. It was Bruno goal. And Rashford. Rashford was in that, actually. It was one of Rashford's best moves as well. Yeah,
it was a very good goal. It was quick. It's direct. There's only a few passes involved in it.
One touch, perfect passing, just, high intensity, quick. It's what you want.
Exactly. So we're going to have a look at some more problems against low blocks. This is against West Brom again. So Marcus Rashford comes deep to show for the ball on the right side. Bruno Fernandes passes to him. Now, this ball ends up going from Bruno to Rashford and then back to Bruno again. This is poor decision making from Rashford. And this is a poor bit of play from Wan-Bissaka as well. Wan-Bissaka should be making a run into this space, so that when Rashford receives the ball, he can just play it around the corner and we have space for him to exploit. Because Marcus Rashford has dropped deeper, this player here has come inside. So there's a gap in this area. So Marcus Rashford, having dropped deeper, should know that a player should be running this way and Marcus Rashford can play the ball to him. Or you can play the ball to Cavani, let Cavani hold up the ball and let our players progress up the pitch and support him. He does neither and plays the ball back. This allows West Brom to get back into shape yet again. So it's poor again. Because Marcus Rashford plays on the right in this game. He actually doesn't play on the left. He plays on the right. And when people got frustrated in this game, it looked like Marcus Rashford didn't actually know what to do. But he does know what to do. He just makes very poor decisions in the game. And he doesn't adjust his body to actually get into the right position to do things. So he just passes the ball back. Our front three are very good at showing for the ball, playing short passes, and then doing nothing with it. They don't make the right movements. They're very good at doing that. And it sort of hides their deficiencies a little bit when certain people are watching them.
Yep.
So you can see this massive space on the right side. This is what happens when we play with Mata. So Mata, we know that he's not a right winger or a right inside forward, right? Mata is here. He's in the central area. Now, it's okay for Mata to come into a central area, but he's done this way too early because you can't do anything here. Bruno Fernandes has dropped deep again. This is against Istanbul. He's dropped deep again. And because there's no option on the right side, he has to go long towards the left. Mata has come central way too early. Mata should be here so that when we get the ball, so that he can receive the ball from Bruno here, and then Bruno can run into that space that Mata is now in at the moment. Instead, Mata's come central and basically just clogged up the midfield. So Bruno goes for a long pass, and that leads to this. Look at this defensive line. It's ridiculous. And do you know what the worst part of it is? There is no player between the midfield and the defense.
Yeah.
Look at this. No one exploiting these areas. Wan-Bissaka is walking.
It looks like two lines of defenders just wearing different shirts.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what it looks like.
Exactly. But because Bruno, as someone who goes in between the lines,
Yeah.
he wishes he passed to himself, basically. Because
Yes.
Bruno's so deep, he can't get into this area quick enough. So we end up in a situation where, again, we pass backwards.
Mm.
And it's the same thing over and over and over again. Players not using their heads, not moving, not passing. And it just becomes...
There's a pattern for everyone. Yeah, it is a pattern, isn't it? But,
yeah, it's really, really frustrating. But, yeah. Oh. So, yeah. I only chose 4 patterns of play because this video has actually gone on for an hour and 15 minutes if we could be here all day with it. But we do have patterns of play. And we have a very fluid system. And the biggest issue that we have, if I'm being perfectly honest, is our players. We can't judge Ollie on his style of play or his patterns of play. And we don't have the players to execute those patterns consistently. And we've seen it. We've literally seen evidence of players just making the poor decisions, not making the right movements, and it literally stifles our entire team. So, yeah.
No, I agree. Great presentation. It was really good. It was brilliant. And this is why I've never been Ollie in or out, really, because I agree with you. I don't think you can judge a manager when he hasn't got those tools, when you can see that there were bigger problems, including the problems at the club. So unless we're finishing 10th, do you know what I mean? After winning an FA Cup or something like that, we're not at Arsenal level yet. It is salvageable, I feel.
Well,
but we
us
have
winning
to
the
start
FA Cup doesn't mean anything. Like,
no.
I know it's a nice day out. Don't get me wrong. I would love us to win the FA Cup. I love the FA Cup as a trophy personally, and I'd like us to win the Europa League.
Yeah,
but
of course.
In terms of how we basically, if we win the Europa League and our board say, you know what, you've won a trophy, we don't need to invest. It will cost us next season. It will really cost us next season.
Yeah, definitely. Let's hope that's not the case. But
yeah.
Listen, people, thank you very much for those of you who've watched the video. Please like the video, share this on your socials, subscribe to the channel if you are new. All of our socials are in the description below, Twitter and Instagram. So if you've got any questions, anything you want to say about these videos, please let us know, and we'll get back to you and address them, and maybe even get you on the show. But thank you for tuning in. And 10 o'clock tonight, the Offside Rule, people, hosted by Yannicka. So please tune in for that.